I'm Megan from meganplus5.com, and today I want to show you how I made these St. Patrick's Day themed wooden tags. And to make this even easier for you, you can buy a craft kit, which includes the wood and the stencils, on meganplus5.com/shop. And then I will leave below everything else that you'll need to create this. So if you want a tutorial on how to actually cut these out from a 1x4, I will have that actually included in a different video, and I will leave the link below for that one. So the first thing that you want to do is to paint all of your wooden tags white. You just want to do a super thin layer of white paint, and then you want to go back after that first layer is dry and then paint a second layer on it just to give it a really good coverage. Be sure to let your wood tags dry completely before moving on to this next step of stenciling. So if you bought one of my DIY craft kits, this step of applying the transfer tape has already been done for you, but if you did not, then you'll need to apply your transfer tape to your stencils, and just give it a good rub with your vinyl squeegee or like a plastic rewards card. Slowly peel the paper backing off of your stencil so that you have your transfer tape and your stencil intact still. Position it where you want it on your wooden tag, then use your vinyl squeegee or your rewards card, give it a good rub again, and then slowly peel away your transfer tape. And then you want to repeat this step for all 3 wooden tags. And then use some masking tape to tape off the edges of your stencil so that way you don't get any green paint where it's not supposed to be green paint. I just used whatever 3 different types of greens I had on hand. I didn't specifically go to the store and pick out 3 different kinds of green paint. So these worked pretty well for me, but you can use whatever shades of green that you would like. You'll also need a cosmetic sponge, and you just want to cut it in half. That way you can use one sponge for all 3 paints. So you want to lightly dip it in one of your shades of green. And be sure you don't have but just a tiny bit of paint on there. And then you just want to dab it on your stencil where the shamrock is exposed on the wood there. And you just want to do one really thin layer, and then you can go back and do a second layer once that layer is dry. So while your first coat is drying on your shamrock, then you can go and you can start working on the other shamrocks. And you just want to do the same exact thing. Just dip your cosmetic sponge lightly into the paint. You can dab it off to the side of the stencil to get off some excess, and then just dab it onto the actual stencil where it's exposed on the wood. And you just want to do a thin layer. You still want to be able to see some of that white through your stencil once you've put that first layer of paint on there. And then again, once that layer is dry, then you can go back and do a second layer. So typically I would only do 2 layers of paint whenever I'm stenciling, especially if I'm stenciling on a white base like this, because your paint is going to show through really easily. It's actually going to be a lot darker once you peel that stencil up than it actually looks right now with the stencil on. So once you have that second layer stenciled on there, you just want to go ahead and remove your masking tape and then remove your stencil. And I find that using an X-Acto knife or like a sturdy sewing pin works really well for this step. And just kind of use caution whenever you're using the X-Acto knife to lift your stencils. You don't want to gouge the wood, rather you just want to get right underneath the stencil and just slowly lift it up. Let your wood tags dry fully before you move on to this next step of distressing. And I'm just using 100 grit sandpaper, and I'm going to distress the edges. I'm going to focus on those and like the corners, and then I'm going to lightly just kind of go over the front of each tag. Now, if I wasn't doing this inside and recording it for a tutorial, I would just use my Ryobi sander. So if you have a like power sander like that, then that is actually what I would recommend that you use. But if you're doing this inside, then I would just use a piece of sandpaper like I'm using here. And you want to do this step for all 3 tags. So one of my most favorite things to use for distressing projects is antiquing wax, and I use a chip brush to do this. So I just, first of all, you want to trim your chip brush down, the bristles on it down, so that you have a nice stiff brush. Dip it into the lid of the wax so you don't get too much, and then dab it off onto your workspace. That's why I use a drop cloth when I'm working. And then you want to do the same thing like you did with the sandpaper, focusing on the edges and like a little bit on the front of it. And you want to do the same thing, but with a brush with your antiquing wax. Something super important to remember with antiquing wax is that a little bit of wax goes a very, very, very long way. That is why I use the lid to dip my brush in versus trying to dip my brush into the actual jar, because if I do that, then I know I'm going to get way too much on my brush, and if I put that on my project, it's going to be very difficult to get that wax off of there once it's already on. And again, you want to repeat this step for all 3 of your wooden tags. And then I just finish my tags off with a piece of twine. So I don't measure this, I just eyeball it to see how long I want it, and then I cut all 3 strings the same length. So then you just want to feed them through the hole at the top of your wooden tag and then tie them off in a knot. Don't forget to grab your DIY craft kit on meganplus5.com/shop, and you will also find a ton of crafty tutorials on there as well. Now, if you enjoyed this St. Patrick's Day craft, be sure to give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so that you are notified anytime I post another DIY video. And thank you so much for watching, guys. Bye.